They have massive problems in the IDF, morale problems. They have people not showing up. They have AWOLs. They have AWOLs, absent without leave, just taken off. They're losing people. I'm told it's somewhere around 750,000, maybe even 1 million that they've lost already from Israel. It's no longer a safe haven. How can you get up in the morning when the Houthis can hit your airport and you say, well, I came here for a safe haven. This is no longer a safe haven. And they have some tremendous problems with their ego. Their ego puts them down there around Quneitra now, and even further south into Syria. It puts them, as you said, attacking the Houthis with these strikes, attacking Syria from one end to the other with airstrikes. I called the IDF a bunch of cowards the other day. I don't know what else you can call them, because they do this. They destroy civilian infrastructure. They kill civilians, babies, women, and everything. And they're immune to danger themselves. They're like the B-2 pilot. B-2 pilot who wrote an article about flying to Baghdad. What to pack on the way to Baghdad was what he called it. He said, I am invulnerable. I am going to drop 2,000-pound satellite-guided bombs on the door of farms, hopefully to decapitate Iraq before the war ever starts. And I'm invulnerable. Am I a warrior? Well, the IDF ought to be asking it that question every day. Am I a warrior? I'm killing people, and I'm absolutely immune to anything but a maintenance failure. This is horrible what's going on. And we're training people to be this way. But as you intimated, and as I'm saying, this is taking a terrible toll on that professional force that the Israelis think is second to none in the world. It is rapidly becoming second to a lot, and maybe third or fourth, because it's falling apart with its. What do you say about it? It's called good order, discipline, and morale in the U.S. Armed Forces, and good order, discipline, and morale is tattered, frayed, and falling apart in the IDF. I think it's only a matter of time until this starts really showing up on the battlefield, because that's where they're supposed to be invulnerable in terms of winning. And they haven't won a damn thing. They haven't satisfied a signal objective.
What I often, and I want to hear your expertise on this, Larry, because you are much closer to military circles than I. But when I look at the situation, I think to myself, Israel can destroy a lot of people's lives, murder a lot of people, commit genocide. But when it actually has to fight, it cannot do that. It is not capable of winning the fight that it says it has already won, that they're already saying they've beat Hezbollah, they've beat Hamas, they've beat the resistance in Palestine, they've beat Iran. But what I see is that they are not fighting anybody. In Syria, there was no fighting. The government fell without fighting. And right. Israel has taken advantage of a situation. To me, that's not strength. That is a product of circumstance. Now they're saying they're going to decimate the Houthis, Ansar Allah, in Yemen. But the United States, the UK, Saudi Arabia, they've been trying to do that for over a decade and have not succeeded. And Israel has already made mention. A lot of their think tanks, even Daniel Hagari, their spokesperson of the military, says, oh, this may be more difficult than we might be letting on. So, Colonel Wilkerson, are they just not fighting anyone? Is this just the overall circumstance that they find themselves in? Because it seems like the Palestinian resistance, even we hear every day in Gaza, they're still fighting. They're still, they have, regardless of what people might think about the weapons, how they're going to arm themselves, what the future is. I just read that Israel is saying that the resistance is too big to get rid of. You basically have to kill everybody because everybody is with the resistance. Your thoughts?
And every time you kill someone, especially a woman or her children, you create 5 more. No question about it. That's the phenomenon of this sort of war. And if you don't understand that phenomenon and do something to accommodate it, you're going to lose. And you're going to lose strategically and big time, which I think is why Israel is going to lose. But let's parse it a little more closely in terms of military operations. What I see is a tank commander down around the southern end of the Galilee Sea, the Sea of Galilee, and out a little into Syria, around Quneitra, that area, the Wada Dam and so forth, driving his tank up to a Syrian Arab who doesn't even know he's Syrian, probably, I mean, he's right there on the border. He probably trades, as my son said when he was monitoring for the Air Force, the Syrian-Iraq border. He said, Dad, I look at that border every night through sophisticated mechanisms. I look at it every night. The only thing happening down there is illicit trade. that's what happens. And they don't know that they belong to any state entity. They're just interested in profit, illicit profit. That's about the only kind they can get. So you look at that and you say, okay, he's driving this tank up to this Arab chieftain, actually. He was in charge of the area around where the tank was. And he says to the guy, and this is on Al Jazeera, he says to the guy, in essence, in Arabic, he says, this is mine now. It's not yours anymore. And the guy looks back at him. He's some sort of mayor or council chairman, sure, a council chairman, something. He looks back at him and he says, this has been my land for so many years, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not yours anymore. It's mine. See that tank? It's mine. Well, this is Israel. This isn't fighting. This is using the empire and its might to tell people they are being dispossessed of their lands, their orchards, and ultimately their lives. And that's how Israel operates. If someone comes up against them, and here's as a military professional, I won't say I would love to see it, because I don't want anybody getting wiped out the way I think this would happen. I would love, though, to see the Israeli tank commander do the same thing to a Turkish tank commander who had an entire platoon or company or maybe a battalion of tanks behind him and get into a scrap. The Israelis would run like chickens with their heads cut off. I guarantee you, because they haven't seen real combat in decades, really since the 73 war. They have not seen real combat. Excursions here with Hezbollah, this, that, and the other thing, and mostly occupation duty. I guarantee you they would turn around and run. But I would love to see this demonstrated to the world so that we could get a little bit of better picture of this undauntable military that Israel feels. And that would happen where they encounter the Turks and the Turks be serious about it. A real army, well equipped and willing to stand their ground. That could happen, yet. The problem with that, or the challenge for that happening, to more or less teach them a lesson, I'm not sure what kind of lesson it would be in the long term, though, because the empire is still going to be behind them, and would, if it came to it, probably put its own troops on the ground there, and that would be the end of the empire for sure, if we put troops in the Levant with Israel with intent of staying there and fighting everybody, including the Houthis. That'd be the end of it. I mean, the unraveling would go a lot faster if we did that. But if it were to happen, it would happen around the arrangements that I understand were made. The Turks and us made an arrangement that the Turks would be allowed to do certain damage to the Kurds, that we would be allowed to seem to protect a certain element of the Kurds. And here's the footnote there. The only reason we're doing that is not because we're beloved of or love the Kurds, just as in Iraq when we abandoned them. It's because they're protecting our some 2,000 to 3,000 troops and equivalent number of contractors in Syria who are stealing Syrian oil and shipping it to Israel. So this is the agreement, and this agreement could fall apart at any time, and suddenly the Israelis would be confronted by a real army. That'd be interesting to see as a military professional. But those are the kinds of explosive things that we've created there now.
A recent report that the United States has been considering attacks on Iran's nuclear sites over this last period, if trying to escalate with Russia in Ukraine to the point of possible nuclear confrontation was not enough. So my question to you, Larry, is what would happen to Israel and the United States? Because it's obvious that Israel is in this long war with many, many fronts that doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon. But the United States, when it comes to this larger proliferation, which seems to be much closer than it ever has been in West Asia, it will include the United States in a deep way. What would happen if the United States were to actually confront Iran, which is a big dream for many of those in the Washington foreign policy establishment?
You know, Danny, I think that's the one disconnect that I can detect between the cognoscenti, if you will, in the empire. It's hard to define them sometimes, from Lindsey Graham to Tom Cotton to whomever you want to name. and Israel. That Netanyahu's ardent desire to have the United States take care of Iran for him is a point that the empire's not willing to go to yet. Witness the fact that we're, I think, trying to effect a new JCPOA, if you will. And the reason for that is because we know, and our military has advised president after president, at least 3 of them, 4 of them actually, counting H.W. Bush, that it would be tantamount to defeat were we to put ground forces into Iran. And one even used the expression that I use sometimes: you like Iraq, you'll love Iran, because it'll be 10 years, $10 trillion, and you'll have enormous casualties, and you will not have subdued the country, which is so much vaster than Iraq, so much more populated, 26, 27 million versus 90 million, so much more homogeneous, 51, 52% Persian, just a different ballgame altogether. We would lose, in other words. In long terms, we would lose. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to expose that kind of vulnerability in that spot at this time. And so presidents have been talked out of it and have become adamant about not wanting a war with Iran that we have to participate in. Here's another factor. Now, remember, I was there in 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, and from roughly August of 2002 to January 2005, Powell gave me the North Korean portfolio. So I'm with EAPR, East Asian Pacific Region of State Department, and the CIA and others almost every week in working groups and such. And we're watching closely through the most sophisticated national technical means we have. And I'm telling you, we're looking at photography that you could read the North Korean soldier's name. We're 24/7 doing this. And all of a sudden, the Koreans have a nuclear weapon. It would not surprise me at all if Iran has a nuclear weapon already. They did it underground. They did it almost exclusively underground. And we were watching them the whole time. And they still had a nuclear weapon. When Kansak-ju and Ye-gun looked at Jim Kelly and said, when he was telling them, here's an economic package, we'll trade you for stopping your nuclear program, reprocessing and all, they looked at him and said, we already have weapons. You could have knocked Jim Kelly over with a feather. I'm not so sure that isn't the case. So another reason why not to do it is to start a nuclear war in the Levant.
There's huge problems militarily trying to take out Iran, especially given the fact that any kind of war with Iran, Larry, would also, correct me if I'm wrong, include everybody else that Israel and the United States has been waging war against, whether it's the Ansar Allah, the Houthis in Yemen, whether it's Hezbollah. Everybody would be compelled to get involved, and that would create so many problems. Maybe your final word on this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the reverse, if you will, China and Russia would use that to do to us what we're using Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova to try to do to Russia, or they'd enter it. I mean, this is truly a game stopper, I believe, for this power shift, which, and I didn't say this, but I'm going to say it. This is basically a China leading this power shift, causing it to happen like a magnet that really doesn't want war, that wants the inevitability of this power shift to slowly and surely take place, and wants the other empire being diminished to accept it and to continue to operate. For 100 years or so, we can still trade, we can still be competitive and all that, because they don't have the same attitude about it that we do. They're not bellicose about it. Sergei Lavrov said it the other day when he was describing Xi Jinping to someone who asked him a question. We're to Chinese a bunch of, and he's, I don't find them that way. I don't find them that way at all. That was not just tactically diplomatic. That was the truth. I don't find them that way either. And I've been in China off and on since 1984. So yeah, if they thought that the United States was serious about putting roadblocks in their way that would be unstoppable or insurmountable, they'd enter it reluctantly, but they would enter it, and they'd beat the bejesus out of us. But then we would go nuclear. That again, that's what scares me.
You have Russia and China with deep relations with Iran. They view West Asia as incredibly important to their overall
We
strategic.
forget it is Asia. It is
Asia. It's incredibly important to their overall development. And both Russia and China understand that the United States has been talking about toppling all of these unwanted governments in order to get to Russia and China, in order to isolate them and then to move the conflict there. Now, a lot of people, Larry, are saying that, well, Russia and China are just waiting around. The Iran is Iran going to go the way of Syria because it's now just kind of hanging back and allowing everything to go on. What do you make of these narratives? I think there's a lot of pessimism right now because of the overall situation, understandably so. But I'm curious about your thoughts of the accuracy of this. Is it that Iran is being too strategically patient and is lending itself to its defeat in the long run, i.e., like Syria?
I think Iran's principal concern, and this ranges from the new president to Zarif, who probably knows us better than anyone else in Iran today, to the leadership of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, to the Guardian Council. I think this is a thought that permeates the whole place. There are different inflections on this thought. They do not want war with the United States. And they realize, I think, inchoately, if not with clarity, this power shift has taken place. And they realize where the engine is, or the engines, really. We've not even talked about Indonesia, Malaysia, and a host of others who are doing quite well, thank you very much. And they don't want to be the fly in that process that causes it to arrest itself for 100 years or maybe permanently, because we'll eliminate ourselves with nuclear weapons, or we'll eliminate enough of human civilization that will stop progress for at least 500 years, such as it is. And then you got climate change to worry about too. And by the way, a nuclear exchange would exacerbate climate change majorly. There's some really good analyses on that, some done by the military. So Iran is in a hard place right now, just as I think Russia is. You know, if you think about this geopolitically, Russia's in both worlds, both the West and the East. It's always been there. When Catherine made her whole court have to speak French, and all diplomacy around Catherine was conducted in French, John Quincy Adams, as a 14-year-old boy, was there. And John Quincy will come back when Alexander takes over as Tsar, when Catherine's dead. And John Quincy will know more about that Russian court than any other American diplomat. It was rumored, for example, that we knew more about Napoleon's movement because one of the Adams was there at the court of the Russians and got all the information than anybody else in Europe. And it's probably true. We did know more about what Napoleon was going to do the next day because we had really talented people in Moscow. So Russia's stuck in both worlds. And that's both an advantage and a disadvantage. And we're seeing the disadvantage right now as she tries to reach to China. At the same time, she blessed for being in Europe. And of course, most of the geographers put, if not all of them, put Russia in Europe, at least from the Urals to the west. So she's got a real hard decision to make. First, how fast is this shift happening? Second, do we go with it tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, or whatever? And how do we go with it? And that's a tough decision, especially when you're buried in this stupid war in Ukraine.
Yeah, and I think we could make that case for all of the powers we just spoke about, Iran and China too. It is a decision. How fast can you accelerate toward this new world that is being born versus how much do you have to contend with and continue to navigate the challenges that a dying empire brings, which we are seeing are really grave challenges, like entire humanity ending possible challenges with nuclear war. And I think that sometimes what gets me is when events happen, I think Americans, especially, and people in the West especially, tend to look at things with a very short view, that this is what has happened, and
Tomorrow morning.
we've concluded Iran is done, Russia is in trouble, China is in trouble, the resistance in West Asia is dead. Look at how neutralized it is. Israel's on the rise. Look at Turkey now. I have my doubts about Turkey's superiority myself, but it seems like everybody is on the bandwagon of Turkey is now this big rising.
I didn't mean to suggest that the Turkish military was absolutely superior. I was more saying the IDF is inferior.
Yeah, no. But what I'm saying is that with what happened to Syria, they didn't even fight anybody then, and yet now they're being anointed because they've taken more territory. They're getting ready to slaughter what had been partially U.S. proxies for so long, the Kurds. That now Turkey's looking like people are saying, "Oh well, Turkey. Look at Turkey. They're now a rising power." And I still don't. I'm with you, Larry. I don't believe that Israel or even Turkey really do anything without the United States' express, not just approval, but of course assistance and wink and a nod. When that wink and a nod goes, in my opinion, that all falls apart. There's
you're right. You could put Ankara in the same boat I just put Russia to a certain extent. Strategically, geopolitically, they've got a decision to make too, and Erdogan seems incapable of making it. Even though the EU has stiffed him now for 20 years, he seems incapable of making it. He hints at it all the time, but he never does anything.
Right. And what he does do is the abhorrence, right? Like the talking about Gaza, not doing anything about it.
Exactly.
Talking about becoming a country in the multipolar world, and then going to Russia and saying, hey, actually, we're going to we're going to be a big part of overthrowing a government in Syria that you are very close with, and we don't care.